From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. The European Union approves its 13th package of sanctions against Russia. The new package will see 200 entities and individuals added to the list. At least 67 Palestinians were killed overnight in Israeli strikes on Gaza, including in areas where civilians were told to seek refuge. Paris's iconic Eiffel Tower stays shut for visitors for a third straight day as staff extend its strike over the monument's financing. And thousands of farmers in India resume their push towards the capital city, New Delhi, after talks with government over their demands for higher crop prices fail. China issues the highest weather alert across large swaths of its territory as temperatures plummet across the south and Beijing battles snowy conditions. Now, as intense fighting in Gaza continues, in New York, the UN Security Council took up another resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire, and yet again, it failed. The United States once again vetoed a draft resolution on the Israeli-Hamas war, blocking the demand for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Washington pushed the 15-member body to call for a temporary ceasefire linked to release of hostages.
Proceeding with a vote today was wishful and irresponsible. And so while we cannot support a resolution that would put sensitive negotiations in jeopardy, we look forward to engaging on a text that we believe will address so many of the concerns we all share, a text that can and should be adopted by the Council so that we can have a temporary ceasefire as soon as practicable, based on the formula of all hostages being released. This temporary ceasefire is critical to getting aid into the hands of Palestinian civilians who desperately need it.
Now, the United States was the lone vote against a ceasefire resolution, which was put forward by Algeria, and the UK was the only abstention. There were 13 votes in support, including Washington's close allies, France, Switzerland, and Slovenia. In fact, they insisted that the humanitarian needs of the Palestinians far outweigh any reservations over the draft text. The Algerian resolution also called for implementation of provisional measures that were ordered by the International Court of Justice just in January. These orders instructed Israel to mitigate its offensive to protect civilians, a free flow of aid into Gaza, and action against the use of genocidal language by Israeli politicians.
The
people of our region have always looked up to the Security Council as the source of international legitimacy. However, and unfortunately, the Security Council has failed them once again. Our message to you today is that the international community should respond to the calls for ending the killing of Palestinians by calling for an immediate ceasefire. All those impeding such calls should review their policies and their calculations, because wrong decisions today will have a cost on our region and our world tomorrow, and this cost will be violence and instability.
Now, the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, said the veto sends the message that Israel can continue to get away with murder. However, the Israeli ambassador responded by saying that they too want a ceasefire, but all hostages must be released and Hamas must turn themselves in. Israel also went on to say that the Algerian resolution empowers jihadists.
The message given today to Israel with this veto is that it can continue to get away with murder. Israel cannot and should not and will not get away with it. We will not allow it. This veto does not absolve Israel of its obligations nor of those who shield it. Not here in the Security Council, not in the ICJ, and not anywhere. Even if the Security Council continues to shirk its responsibilities, to be obstructed by the veto of a permanent member over and over, the other organs of the international system are upholding their responsibilities. And one day or another, Palestinian children will not be viewed as a demography threat, but as children with a right to life and to fulfill their hopes and dreams.
You truly want a ceasefire? Well, Israel also wants a ceasefire. Your children are not the ones that are falling in battle against bloodthirsty terrorists. They are ours. If Hamas survives, it will be our children that Hamas will murder in cold blood again. Israel seeks a ceasefire. But there is only one formula that we are willing to accept. All of our hostages must be released, and Hamas must turn themselves in. Colleagues, the Algerian resolution not only empowers jihadists by calling for a ceasefire, it also fails, again, to condemn Hamas for their heinous crimes.
Now, it's no surprise that both China and Russia lashed out at the United States over its veto. In fact, Beijing went on to say that Washington's decision has pushed the situation in Gaza into a more dangerous one, and Moscow called it disgraceful inaction.
阿尔及利亚展现出理性
The outcome of today's vote clearly shows that on the issue of a ceasefire to halt the fighting in Gaza, it is not that the Security Council does not have an overriding consensus, but rather it is the exercise of the veto by the United States that has stifled the Council consensus. The US veto sent a wrong message, pushing the situation in Gaza into a more dangerous one.
在加沙停火止战问题上。
Все это время Совет Безопасности ООН не может принять критически важное решение с требованием...
I wish to recall that on the 16th of October last year, when Russia proposed the very first draft solution with this call, the number of the dead Palestinians were approximately 1,000 people. At that point, Western delegations at the Council preferred to abstain en masse in order not to incur the ire of Washington. Colleagues, it will be no exaggeration to state that this new figure to more than 28,000 dead is the cost of their very first disgraceful inaction. This is the collective responsibility of Western delegations at the Security Council.
Now, the United States has now proposed a rival draft resolution, and this would see the Security Council underscore its support for a temporary ceasefire and oppose a major ground offensive by Israel in Rafah. It would also be based on the formula of all hostages being released and calls for lifting all barriers to the provision of humanitarian aid. In fact, Washington says it plans to allow time for negotiations and will not rush to vote. Until now, the United States has been averse to the word ceasefire in any UN action on the Israel-Hamas war. However, the latest text signals a shift. This is the second time since October 7th that Washington has proposed a Security Council resolution on Gaza. In fact, Russia and China vetoed its first attempt in October of last year. Staying with the United States, we shift our focus to a political and legal war that Republican frontrunner Donald Trump continues to face. In the latest saga, Trump compared his legal troubles to the persecution of Alexei Navalny, the Russian opposition figure and Putin critic who died in an Arctic prison just last week. In an interview, Trump said Navalny was a very brave man who should not have returned to Russia. However, he remained cautious to not assign any blame for Navalny's sudden death. U.S. President Joe Biden and other leaders in the West have blamed Putin for Navalny's death. But the former U.S. president has railed against his ongoing legal entanglements, calling them politically motivated. In fact, speaking on the recent $355 million judgment against him in his New York fraud trial, Trump said it is a form of Navalny. It is a form of communism or fascism. Trump added that he has multiple legal trials only because of the fact that he is in politics, saying that America is becoming a communist country in many ways. Still, as he eyes a possible return to the White House, a recent survey ranked Donald Trump the worst of all of the 45 presidents of the United States. Current President and chief Trump rival Joe Biden debuted on that list at the 14th spot. The survey of 154 scholars ranked Trump below even those who failed to prevent the Civil War or botched its aftermath. No doubt the mercurial ex-president will use this latest ranking as further grievance to excite his base of MAGA supporters. Meanwhile, as Trump looks to secure the nomination, he is focusing on his potential running mate. Trump suggested that he has at least a half a dozen names that are on his vice presidential shortlist. This list includes South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, which is quite shocking considering the clashes they had during the primary, and former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Former Republican presidential candidate and biotech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy is also on the list. While his decision is still pending, Trump did, however, single out Tim Scott for the most praise. Now, as we know, Tim Scott dropped out of the Republican primary last year and endorsed Donald Trump over his fellow South Carolinian, Nikki Haley. In fact, he has been campaigning hard for Trump in his home state of South Carolina. South Carolina voters head to the polls this coming Saturday. And for our next story, we head south to the Caribbean. A judge in Haiti has charged the widow of murdered President Jovonel Moise in connection with the assassination of the former leader. The 122-page document has charged Martine Moise with conspiring with former Prime Minister Claude Joseph for killing President Moise. The judge said that Martine killed her husband with the intent of becoming Haiti's next president. And as we see now, the plot has certainly thickened. Here's our report.
It was the 7th of July in the year 2021. Haiti's 43rd president, Jovonel Moise, was enjoying the calm Caribbean breeze. Moise was spending the afternoon at his residence in the capital city of Port-au-Prince. Perched on top of a hill, Moise could see rows of houses from his presidential residence. In an instant, the Haitian president's world turned bloody. 28 armed gunmen stormed the residence. 7 of them entered the bedroom where President Jovonel Moise and his wife Martine were resting. Moise was attacked and punched before being shot 12 times. His wife Martine was shot in the arms and thighs. The attack lasted a few minutes. Haiti had lost its president. President Jovonel Moise was dead. This sent Haiti into a state of shock. Massive protests erupted. Thousands filled the streets of Port-au-Prince. They demanded justice, and so did the dead president's wife, Martine.
Hope that my husband will find justice. Every country that can help, please help, because the people that did that are still out there. And I don't know if their name will ever be out. But at some point, if they find the people that send the money, the people that financially help, I think that they will find the people that give the order. So I will have hope that Jovonel Moise will have justice, and I won't stop asking for justice until justice is found.
Police officials sprung into action. 3 suspects were killed and at least 20 were arrested. Haiti officials said that most of the suspects were Colombian gang members. In addition, a Haitian businessman was sentenced to life for planning the assassination. It was almost a shut and sealed case until a judge issued an arrest warrant for Martine Moise. Dead President Jovonel Moise's case has been brought back to life. Now, a judge has accused his wife of planning the assassination. A 122-page document says that Martine Moise worked with former Prime Minister Claude Joseph to kill her husband. The judge claims that Martine got her husband killed because she wanted to be the next president of Haiti. The prosecutor has ordered the arrest and trial of Martine and Claude Joseph. At least 50 other people have been named in the warrant. Martine Moise and Claude Joseph have blamed the current administration and called the court's judgment a political play. Joseph says that the only person to benefit from President Jovonel Moise's death was his successor, Ariel Henry. The former Prime Minister says that Henry is carrying out a political coup against Martine Moise. Meanwhile, the judge says that the court works independently and is not influenced by the government. The case of the assassination of President Jovonel Moise has taken an unusual twist. It has gotten murkier with no sight of justice. Haiti continues to suffer from gang violence, but the case of President Moise had brought hope to the people. They thought the assassination would unite everyone against criminals. Instead, it has created political rifts. And now, a power struggle is out in the open. Will President Jovonel Moise get justice? Or will this be another victory for gangs, mafia and criminals? Haiti demands answers.
Now in China, the People's Liberation Army, or the PLA, already the world's largest military, is undergoing a massive expansion. In fact, it is setting up what it is calling corporate brigades. Major companies in China are setting up their own fighting forces. Reports say that at least 16 big Chinese firms are involved with the expansion, and the majority of these firms are in fact state-owned. These units, known as People's Armed Forces Departments, will act as a reserve force for China's military. The forces, comprising of corporate workers, will be readily available for wartime missions. China says they will also help maintain social order and respond to national disasters. Now, this comes amid Beijing's growing concerns about potential conflict abroad, as well as social unrest at home as the economy continues to struggle. China's economy did grow 5.2% in 2023, which is slightly better than targeted expectations. However, the Asian dragon is in the middle of multiple challenges, including a crisis in the property sector, corporate defaults, and rising youth unemployment, as well as surging financial stress on local governments. These problems have left the Chinese people increasingly frustrated, which has led to large protests and demonstrations. In fact, the country witnessed more than double the number of labor strikes and protests in 2023 than in 2022. In fact, last year, protesters also clashed with police at the world's biggest iPhone factory in Zhengzhou. The property market slump also triggered a widespread mortgage strike as it angered home buyers across Chinese cities who refused to pay their mortgages on unfinished apartments. And this led to cash-strapped developers delaying construction, with many of them even abandoning their development projects. Some analysts say the resurgence of these militias is likely driven by the COVID-19 pandemic, and China could possibly be setting up these forces to help manage and coordinate responses to major national emergencies. The move is also related to Xi Jinping's efforts to overhaul the country's military, as he had announced earlier his goals of modernizing the PLA and transforming it into a world-class fighting force. Now, these private corporate militias have rarely been seen in China since the 1970s. In fact, they originated in the 1920s to support the Communist Party and its battles. However, when the Communist Party came to power in 1949, these units were embedded into public organizations. And these forces were said to be China's defense against the threat of imperial forces such as the United States. In fact, the number of these forces peaked in the 1950s when military tensions was high with the United States over Taiwan. And now history is seen to be repeating itself as tensions with the United States and Taiwan are once again peaking. But the move not only reflects China's desire to tighten control over society, but also puts the country on a war footing. In fact, President Xi Jinping has vowed that Taiwan will be reunified with the mainland, even if it requires using force to take control. He says it is a historical inevitability and that China's Communist Party believes that Taiwan is part of its territory. The island, however, rejects Beijing's claims of sovereignty and considers itself to be an independent nation. Okay, so how do you take your coffee? We know the choices are as vast and as deep as the ocean itself. Perhaps a frothy caramel iced coffee that tickles your taste buds, or you're a devout follower of the pumpkin spice gospel. But can you fathom to have pork, yes, pork, with your coffee? Not to be confused with a plate of succulent, juicy meat with a cup of joe to wash it down. But if you are a culinary daredevil, then Starbucks is ready to rock your world. Because the coffee giant has come up with the most unexpected way to feed your pork with coffee. And I guess it's true with the saying that pork fat does rule. Here's our next report to explain.
In a world where culinary chaos reigns supreme, we've seen it all. Pineapples daring to lounge atop pizza slices. Fries taking the plunge into milkshake pools. Eggs getting cozy with ketchup. Some people can't dream of such pairings, while others swear by them, sparking debates that have lasted for decades. But hold on to your forks, because the gastronomic roller coaster isn't over yet. Let's roll out the red carpet for the newest, most eyebrow-raising member of the Flavor Fusion Club. Starbucks is throwing its hat into the ring with an offering that's exclusively for coffee lovers in China. And it's ready to make your taste buds do the dragon dance. Introducing from the land where the Lunar New Year rings loud and proud, Starbucks China's latest marvel, the Abundant Year Savory Latte. Wait for it. It's a pork-flavored coffee. Yes, you heard it right. Shocked? Intrigued? Well, so are we. Starbucks is now serving up a concoction that sounds like it came straight out of a culinary mad scientist's lab. The braised pork coffee.
Skills, complementary brands.
What if your plate of braised pork and your coffee cup had a baby? Well, that's exactly how your cup would be. Here's how this unique potion is crafted. Traditional Dongpo braised pork flavored sauce, swirled into espresso and steamed milk, with an extra dollop of pork sauce, and wait for it, pork breast meat garnish. All yours for a sum of $9 a cup. It's available exclusively in their reserve stores where coffee dreams or nightmares come true. Out of those who dared to try it, some said the unique cup was dense and smooth. The others said it was priced too high. Many still remain wary. They say they can't allow pork and coffee to exist in their mouths at the same time. But why would Starbucks venture into the realm of meat-flavored beverages? The answer lies in the symbolism of meat in China. The Chinese people believe consuming meat brings prosperity for the new year. Pork, a symbol of strength, wealth and blessings, is central to the Chinese New Year feast, making this latest drink a liquid homage to the traditional Lunar New Year customs.
That's all for the show today. We certainly thank you for joining us. Tune in again tomorrow, and thanks so much for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.